But very old movies starring Laurel and Hardy still have love from their fans to this day, nearly 100 years ever since these movies were first made, and it's not just about their nostalgia value among older viewers. Newer generations get introduced to these movies and they tend to react quite strongly when watching their best movies and short films. Laurel and Hardy's movies are generally very well conceived and well thought out at the basic level of casual viewing, but these movies also have a good deal of rewatch value as well. In this video, I'm going to talk about 18 examples of hidden jokes and subtleties in their movies, some of them being about the kinds of themes to bear in mind the next time you watch any of their movies. Number 1. In this little moment here from Chickens Come Home, Stanley is seen walking about in his coat, but he absent-mindedly is still wearing a coat hanger on him here. Number 2. Laurel and Hardy's earlier films often feature this bust of William Shakespeare, who of course has written tragedy and comedy stage plays. This bust has knocked itself off onto people's heads a few times too. Incidentally, a bust of Shakespeare is also seen in the Adam West Batman TV show. Number 3, it is very well known that Laurel and Hardy, as grown men, symbolically double up as young kids, and their movies constantly feature obvious and subtle indicators to that effect. One subtle example is seen here, when they try to leg it from a prison. The prison guard shoots them right on their buttocks, and they voluntarily walk back to prison. Funny little moment, but did you ever think this moment is much like when a disciplinary parental figure smacks misbehaving kids on their butts and tells them to go upstairs to their bedroom? In this case, this is the grown-up version of being grounded. Number 4, every now and then their movies feature deliberately contradicting verbal signs. In one of their earlier silent films, poor Stanley goes around with a bad toothache as we see a comical "keep smiling" sign in the background, and in one of their later films, the guys were working in some musical home factory which have the ironic "silence while men are working" sign here. Number 5, their movies feature little nudges to the audience about the staged artificial look to their movies. So here, after James Finlayton's posh bloke goes off in a yellow cab, his servants go off in a black and white cab. And in another example, this is from the short film Me and My Pal, a radio announcer said the following.
Mr. Laurel says that after viewing the situation from all sides, he is thoroughly reconciled to the fact that the moving picture industry is still in its infancy.
I made a whole video about that subject if you want to know more about it. Number 6, Laurel and Hardy's movies very consistently play upon our fears of being really physically dirty. But have you ever thought about these moments whenever Oliver gets his groin area wet or when he gets his side of the bed soaking wet? Here, Stanley accidentally spills water on Oliver's hospital bed, and he responds with his bedpan. Clearly these are all about people's anxieties of wetting themselves, which usually happens for young toddlers, and although most of us generally keep our bodily fluids under control, that problem comes back to some of us when we either get plastered or when we get really old. If any of you doubt this is what Laurel and Hardy intended, here's this little moment in an ancient Charlie Chaplin film called Easy Street. Chaplin had worked with Stan Laurel before during their earlier theatrical careers, Stan Laurel being an understudy for Chaplin, so a lot of Chaplin's movies naturally overlap a lot with Laurel and Hardy's movies. Number 7, another example of toilet humour, which is funny and not something that kids would pick up on. Stanley accidentally spoils Oliver's hat with a piece of cake. Oliver is obviously annoyed, but he did momentarily look upward, likely wondering if a bird is hanging around in his house. Number 8, this is already fairly known to Laurel and Hardy fans, but for those of you who didn't notice it before, the father character in the short film Perfect Day uttered a swear word as a priest is about to walk by. A much lesser known variation of this is heard in the short film Be Big. Now this is from the Spanish film version. I read that this little moment was filmed for its original American version, but it was taken out of there due to runtime constraints. Meanwhile, this Spanish version we see here was part of a full feature-length presentation with another short film. But anyway, here in this moment, I swear Oliver here said something he shouldn't have said. Number 9. Some of their movies feature little details equating Laurel and Hardy to stray animals, when they are homeless that is. For example, in Night Owls, the one where Laurel and Hardy pretend to burgle a posh mansion, 2 cats are wandering by them here, and they had to pretend to be stray cats. Oliver also pretended to be his pet dog here.
Get away from here, you little nut! Go on!
The movies have been being compared to doggy-like creatures too, also known as asses. Stanley here enjoys eating Oliver's hat. Perhaps he might take a similar liking to some kind of furniture. And Stanley is very much like a pet puppy at times, especially considering his yelps.
Don't keep doing that. You sound like a seal. Take a drink of water. You know what, dog? I heard it barking. My friend Mr. Laurel has the hiccups.
All of these animal-like parallels go all the way back to Laurel and Hardy's very first on-screen performance together, the silent film called The Lucky Dog. And I think they took another leaf from Charlie Chaplin on that level too. Number 10. They are famously associated with a cuckoo theme tune, and they sometimes appear with cuckoo sound effects.
Good morning, dear teacher, good morning to you.
That's obvious stuff, but it has occurred to me recently that maybe this is all a play on the term bird brain, given the character's limited intellect. Number 11. Costume details. Oliver Hardy's jumper very often looks too small for him, with usually one button holding his jumper together. On surface appearance, this could just be a joke on Oliver's weight, but this detail I believe also reflects Oliver's tendency for emotional outburst, compared to Stanley, who sometimes has his jacket covering him completely, which appropriately reflects Stanley as a quiet person. Now, Stanley does sometimes wear a vest on open display, but a number of their movies do have this contrasting costume pattern. It's quite consistent. And these moments here do show that Stanley doesn't wear a vest underneath in those instances. So I think this contrasting costume pattern between quiet Stanley and loud, impatient Oliver might have been intended. In addition, Oliver's undersized jumper might be visually communicating Oliver as an overgrown child symbolically. That, plus his tiny mustache, gives him the aura of a young teenager who has just entered puberty. Yep, Laurel and Hardy, with their adult bodies and childlike demeanour, they double up as symbolic teenagers for the teenagers to identify with. Number 12. Sometimes in their movies there are side characters and extras who have very curious intellectual and behavioural overlaps with Stanley and Oliver. For example, this postman does the same thing that Stanley also does here. In the short film called The Chimp, these two characters here are kind of like doppelgangers of the main characters. The big guy with his tantrum issue. His jumper is nearly unbuttoned completely, suggesting him to be a pretty explosive person generally. Remember I said this just a minute ago regarding Oliver Hardy's own jumper, and how that reflects Oliver's own volatile attitude to Stanley. And the guy on the sofa here. He has a slightly frizzled hairdo, he has similar clothing to what Stanley usually wears, a vest, and he looks quite like Stanley facially. Another good example is this prison warden in the prison movie Pardon Us, who makes a statement that Stanley would say himself.
It was the firing of the signal shots in the mess hall that saved us from a disaster of cataclysmic dimension.
After all, there is a little bit of Laurel Hardy in us all. I think we all know this deep down. Number 13, some people have commented on Laurel Hardy having amusing undertones which come off as homosexually related.
Well, what's the matter with her anyway?
Oh, I don't know. She says that I think more of you than I do of her.
Well, you do, don't you?
Well, we won't go into that.
Now, I do think that Laurel Hardy deliberately played around with the homosexual vibes for laughs. Not necessarily in a, oh, these characters do fancy each other kind of way. But I think it's more to do with the social embarrassment associated with it back in the 1920s and 30s. And Randy Scriffetz's book on Laurel Hardy mentioned about some earlier script drafts of some of her movies that were said to be risque and were said to have not been filmed because of that. Here, I'll show you these pages for your consideration. However, I believe all of this is ultimately a playful metaphor of them representing married couples, straight that is, and this is part of the universal companionship themes of the characters. They represent many different forms of human bonding, including married couples, sibling bonding, parental and child bonding, best friends and so on. So yeah, the Laurel Hardy characters are so widely relatable for many different kinds of audiences. Number 14, Stan Laurel said in one interview about his movies being generally slower paced than the faster paced comedies of the time, and he said that this slow pacing is one way of the films reflecting the Laurel Hardy characters as slow thinkers. Number 15, have you ever noticed these musical cues which sound very reminiscent of human laughter and giggles?
What do I do with these? Put them on.
The ending scene of the short film Another Fine Mess has a very interesting and amusing musical cue which simultaneously come off as a combination of panicking tension and uncontrollable laughter, very fitting for the situation. We could consider this musical aesthetic pattern as a subliminal precursor to the canned laughter technique. Number 16. This is already fairly well known to Laurel Hardy fans, but this is a nice one to mention. In the short film called Brats, Oliver objects to what Stanley says here.
Certainly, if you must make a noise, make it quietly.
Make a noise quietly.
And yet, in one of their follow-up films called Their First Mistake, Oliver says the exact same thing that Stanley said.
Now fix that lamp. And if you must make a noise, make it quietly.
It's one of the little clues that there's a little bit of Stanley in Oliver. Number 17. In the music box, we see a fountain that has a laughing look on its facial decoration as our heroes keep falling into this fountain, and in the Laurel Hardy murder case, a cuckoo clock scared them here. If there is a god in Laurel and Hardy's universe, then either he's indifferent to their plight, or he finds amusement in their misfortunes. The subliminal musical laughter I mentioned earlier could possibly even be the laughing voice of God. And number 18. In Laurel Hardy's very first sound film Unaccustomed As We Are, listen to what the wife says here, and note how Oliver responds to us, the audience.
What do you mean? by taking this poor little innocent to South America and advising him to burn his bridges when he never even started a fire in his life.
Seems like this woman has turned this domestic situation into a court trial. But perhaps this might suggest one of the underlying themes behind Laurel Hardy's movies. In many of their movies which involve Laurel Hardy getting into trouble, and sometimes because of misunderstandings and unfortunate circumstances they were not aware of, their movies kind of play out like we are being presented with the full facts of the criminal and civil cases they are involved in. And we, the audience, are the jury, observing what happens in these stories, feeling pity for Laurel Hardy, but also laughing at them too. Okay, that is all I will say for now about these ancient but timeless comedy movies. If you haven't seen these movies for a long time, I recommend you go back to them, bearing in mind the kinds of things you have learned from this video. If you are interested, go check out my video about why technical flaws made the Laurel Hardy movies better, and I also got video studies on other movies and TV shows on my channel, including The Prisoner, Blue Velvet, the James Bond films, Full Metal Jacket, and more. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.
Goodbye.